A real treat to be here. Thank you very much. As the invitation, the longer the intro probably suggests something about your age, but I will ignore that for the moment and hopefully have a good discussion today. It's interesting giving this presentation to the LunchMAR group because, in fact, you are the folks that are really talking about some of the cutting edge things that I want to see more of, that we need to see more of if we're going to have resilient water supply systems. And I think groundwater is particularly important in supporting our water supply system. So my presentation or my discussion and the discussion that I want to have is really to try and encourage us, inspire us maybe a little bit to try to think above and beyond what we have to do today, but think about the future and how to build a more resilient water systems going forward. I like to start with a real world place, and this place is this is the Amargosa Canyon in very southeastern California, out in the desert, not far from the Nevada border. And this is really one of my favorite places in the world. And the reason I like to start a groundwater presentation here is because, to me, this green ribbon in the middle of some of the most austere landscape in the world is really a great indicator of the magic of groundwater. All through the year, every day, throughout the year, every year, this stream is flowing in the desert, even though it's one of the driest places in the world. And the reason it does that is because a huge watershed upstream of this collects water, and the water moves into the groundwater, slowly moves toward the south, and emerges at the mouth of this canyon. And this shows just how big groundwater is, how the slow response time of groundwater can affect water resources, and really illuminates some of the magical properties of groundwater and groundwater basins. So my talk is about this magic of groundwater basins and how we unlock it. I'll make the case that our groundwater basins are amazing pieces of natural infrastructure that are really underutilized. And if we can figure out how to make the best use of these amazing facilities, we can do wonders for our water supply reliability as people and in supporting the ecosystems that depend on groundwater and depend on the surface flows that depend on groundwater. So how do we unlock this magic? Well, first, a little bit of station identification. Why is it that someone from an environmental organization is talking about groundwater and groundwater management? When I first got involved in environmental advocacy, which has now been many years ago, it certainly was with an image of something like this in mind. This is the Shasta River up in Northern California, and we tend to want to protect these beautiful, iconic places that are obviously rich in wildlife. But as a water engineer and after working in consulting for many years, I realized that unfortunately our water system, from an ecosystem standpoint, our water system too often looks like this. These are facilities that we built to manage our water supply so that we can live and thrive and grow food in arid areas. And it leaves our streams and rivers highly altered. But in fact, if we're going to have healthy ecosystems in the future, it's going to be because we build deliberately the needs of nature into the way we manage our water supply. Every day, thousands and thousands of people get up across the West, easily thousands of people just in California, with the idea of managing water to meet some need. And they get up and that's what they do with their time. And so we need to, if we want to have healthy ecosystems, we're going to have to figure out how to build those ecosystem needs in to the way those people operate, how we manage our water, how we turn the knobs on our reservoirs, how we adjust our canals, etc. And so I see our work as about working alongside other water users to figure out how to build ecosystem needs proactively and alongside the needs of cities and farms. So that's the way I take a look at the system and what our job is. And in fact, let's dig into groundwater basins. I mentioned that they're underutilized. Our groundwater management of the past has tended to be pretty passive and reactionary, under-monitored, really only do responses when something goes wrong, and it's chronically underfunded. We really haven't spent very much money, generally speaking, to manage groundwater up to this point. Now, there are certainly exceptions to that. Southern California and a few hot spots in California of managing groundwater are grand exceptions to that, but this has tended to be the way we've approached groundwater management. Now, then comes SGMA. Now, I don't need to spend too much on this. I'm going to kind of move pretty quickly in the early parts of this because most of the folks here are well aware of SGMA and groundwater management in general. But SGMA changed things dramatically in much of California. Outside those hot spots of good groundwater management, SGMA is forcing us to implement some groundwater management for the first time, form local agencies, develop safe sustainability plans, and avoid these undesirable results. Now, I mentioned the groundwater management of the past is largely passive, reactionary, under-monitored, underfunded. And if I were to develop a little resilience meter that shows where we are in groundwater management, most of our groundwater management was over here to the left in this red zone. Then came SGMA. In fact, even with SGMA, the basic requirements of SGMA are pretty defensive. It's avoid these undesirable results. Don't let things get worse, is you might say is generally what SGMA suggests. But at least now we have the ability to manage. We have groundwater sustainability agencies in place with some level of sophistication and a growing level of sophistication. So I think we moved up that dial. We moved up from that passive groundwater management. Now we're paying attention, putting monitoring programs in place, et cetera. So that's a big step forward. But let's talk about going the next step. And I think a real key to changing our mentality about groundwater basins is to discontinue thinking of them as this passive basin that sits there and gives us water when we put a well into it, and think about it as natural infrastructure. So let's just take a little bit of a look at that to get this in our head, and let's work together to change this this view of groundwater basins from this passive structure that's sitting there for our use to a piece of infrastructure. And let's think about all that it does for us. Groundwater basins collect water from a whole different range of sources. They collect water from rainfall. They collect water that leaks out of our canals that we use for irrigation. If groundwater levels are pumped down a little bit, groundwater basins pull water from the streams and rivers, and they collect it from intermittent runoff from the hills, and they store that water. So they're amazing collection and storage facilities, but they do much more than that. The top layer of the groundwater basins, the soils, are giant bioreactors that treat our water. And in fact, our groundwater, for the large part in California and in many places across the West, it's pretty good quality due to that treatment process and the filtration that happens. It stores the water, as I mentioned, and it even conveys it to wells. We put wells in the ground and pump the water, and the groundwater basin collects that water and moves it toward our wells. What we don't think as much about it, but groundwater also provides habitat support for a wide range of habitat, riparian areas, wetlands, etc. And in some cases, if we haven't pumped the groundwater levels too low, groundwater supports stream flow. It's a really important, it's the reason streams flow in the dry periods. So these are amazing pieces of natural infrastructure. What would it cost if you had to build this to begin with? You would certainly outfit it with some pretty sophisticated, extensive SCADA systems so that you could monitor the condition, make sure it's in good shape, and figure out how to make the best use of it. When you start thinking of groundwater basins as natural infrastructure, then you start thinking about how we can proactively manage them to do more with the groundwater, the infrastructure that we have. I've learned from my years in water that if you give engineers and water planners a chance, they will figure out how to make the most out of facilities. And that's what I'm encouraging us to do with these amazing groundwater basins, these amazing pieces of natural infrastructure. So let's talk about moving beyond this basic Sigma compliance, this don't let things get worse, and think about really managing for resilience. I've used this word a couple of times, this idea of resilience. And our EDF official definition of resilience is the capacity of socio-economic, ecological systems to support human and natural well-being as climate change and other stressors interact unpredictably over time. Spent a lot of time wrestling with that definition, as you might imagine. When I think about water management and resilience in water management, I think of it as basically, first of all, let's assume that we're going to have change. And there's a lot of different reasons that we're going to have change. Our understanding changes, our human needs changes. Certainly climate change is affecting our hydrologic system, so there's some more change. And the tools and information systems that we have to manage the system also change. So let's just assume beginning, it's going to change. We don't know exactly where the endpoints are going to be, and we're not even managing to an endpoint. And let's plan to deal with that change and avoid harmful disruptions and impacts that we want to avoid. And let's think about what are the services in the future that we want to preserve, and let's work to protect them and build that into our management system. So first of all, what are the functions and services we want to support? In the case of groundwater, you can, if you go with the status quo of groundwater management, what's going to happen is things are eventually going to degrade, and some of these really special things that you want to protect, perhaps it's a rural drinking water supply well for a disadvantaged community, maybe it's a wetland habitat, maybe it's some stream flow in a stream that has unique or special fish and wildlife populations. So if you just continue to wait in the status quo management, what tends to happen is the groundwater levels go down, and eventually one by one of those services are lost. And so let's think about what are the services that we want to protect long-term, and what are the groundwater conditions we want to maintain or we need to maintain to protect those services, and let's build that proactively into our management regime. Now let's talk a little more about some of the tools for groundwater resilience. And this is the space you folks are working on in LunchMAR. One tool for managing resilience is community engagement. Really important to engage all the different stakeholders so that you clarify and pinpoint all of the services that you want to protect and support. It's also important for transparency, information exchange, and for political durability. Certainly manage recharge. That's what the LunchMAR process is it's a big part of that. We have dedicated on-farm, dedicated recharge basins. We have on-farm recharge that you've seen people present and talk about. Some great work is being done in that area. In-lieu recharge, floodplain inundations, and other methods. Managed recharge, really important part of this proactive groundwater management. Now, one of the other tools is importantly, in these managed recharge and many of these other tools, we need improved accounting systems. We also need real good cooperation between surface water and groundwater users and other entities. And we also have to accept some inefficiencies if we're going to do these. Another tool, groundwater trading programs. This requires that we allocate the water among the users, which is something that we're reluctant to do in our history. And we have to have good accounting systems for that. Another tool for groundwater resilience is zonal management, basically defining where are some special areas that have unique needs, unique services that you want to protect, defining those areas and what the management criteria are in those areas. You may, for instance, want to define specific groundwater levels along stream flows or in the vicinity of wetlands or near rural small community water supply wells. And you want to manage the groundwater to protect those valuable functions. And you can do it because of one of those magical characteristics of groundwater. You can actually have spatially varying conditions and manage to maintain those. Now, Sigma is a key to that water supply resilience. The people who are working to meet those basic requirements of Sigma have authorities, capacities, and we do have the know-how to manage more proactively, to manage these natural infrastructure facilities like they were facilities that we built for specific purposes, and do it for a number of reasons, like protecting our drinking water supply, sustaining stream flows, supporting ecosystems, and of course, sustaining our water supplies for our cities and farms. And let's move this resilience meter up further. Now I'm going to go to the aspirational part and talk about taking it to the next level. What are some of the things that if we were really being inventive, if we really had our act together and we're thinking far in the future and planning well, what might we do? I'm just going to give you a few examples of them. Some are things that people are already doing some great work on. Operating recharge ponds, for instance. If you're going to have recharge, you've got to have recharge ponds. What other benefits might those recharge ponds provide if you think proactively about it? Some great work by people like the Nature Conservancy, Audubon, in defining how these recharge basins can be managed to provide habitat for migratory birds, for instance. And that's basically a matter of defining those criteria. What are the conditions that are needed? When are the conditions needed? And designing the operation so that you meet those conditions when the birds need them. Another example of proactive management at the next level is in regional sanitation districts. This is the folks who treat my wastewater in the Sacramento metro area, their Harvest Water project. This project is in the design stages now, and this is going to take treated wastewater, deliver it to farmers south of Elk Grove in the vicinity of the Cosumnes River Preserve, provide that water to farmers for a reliable water supply, and through that in-lieu recharge that occurs because now those farmers are less reliant on the groundwater, that raises the groundwater level, helps to protect really important ecosystems, and provides a buffer for drought water supply. Really inventive project going the next level. Another next level of benefits is something that we really need to think a lot about in the context of LunchMAR and managed aquifer recharge with floodwater. Now, one of the challenges, of course, is how do you take that water when it's available in really large volumes and get it in the ground or spread it out so that it gets in the ground in short periods of time. Real challenge. We've made some great progress and some great ideas are being tested in that. But what happens if we think about coordinating our reservoir storage more holistically with our groundwater storage? Free releasing flows out of reservoirs to recharge groundwater at a more moderate pace. And thinking of those surface reservoirs, some of them fairly big, but compared to the groundwater basins, they're really not all that big. Thinking of those surface reservoirs as forebays for groundwater recharge. Now I know there's some good work being done around this in some of the LunchMAR analyses. Really positive signal. It's also really challenging for some of the participants to get their heads around. It's going to require surface water managers, reservoir operators, groundwater managers to figure out how to work together in ways that they haven't done it before. Obviously, some water rights issues, accounting issues layered on top of that. Another thing to think about, an idea that I think could be really powerful, is let's think about banking environmental water in the groundwater. Imagine if up and down the Central Valley, we were able in advance to store water in the groundwater that is allocated for the environment, and then draw on those allocations when we need it for environmental flows. Perhaps we need it for supplemental flows during fairly normal years. Perhaps we need it for emergency cool water in extreme drought or late in the season when we're running short of cool water in our reservoirs. If we add to that the ability to have water exchanges so that the environmental water could be traded at different times to reservoir operators for water from their reservoir, there's a lot of flexibility in that. And I frankly think concepts like this offer great promise, especially in the Central Valley, but also in other parts of California and the West, to meet some of those really tough environmental needs, those needs that come up when everybody else is short of water. So what will it take? Well, obviously, we talked some about the robust accounting systems. We're beginning to build those accounting systems for groundwater. We need to invest a lot more in those accounting systems and get them right, provide the transparency that everyone's going to need in order to feel good about doing new and different things. For some of these environmental needs, we need an environmental water manager. We need someone who has responsibility to take water allocations that are available to the environment and manage them proactively to get the most out of them. We need someone, in this case, to sort of act like the water agency for the environment so that they can participate in an active way in collaborative projects with other water agencies. It's really amazing if you look at what collaboration between water agencies have accomplished in places like the Bay Area, in places like Sacramento, and certainly in Southern California. We need an active engagement by the environmental interest in water management with real assets and the ability to put water in different places and store it and use it proactively. No doubt we're going to need funding. We need to put, it's challenging times at the moment, but we need to put billions of public dollars into improving this system. And we have been advocates for bringing public dollars to help make this happen. It also needs to leverage philanthropic investments. It's unlikely that philanthropy is going to build new reservoirs. It's unlikely that philanthropy is going to be able to build big groundwater storage projects, but that philanthropic dollars can be used very targeted to leverage other funds and to test things that others may not be quite ready to invest in. Undoubtedly, it's going to need private capital. A lot of discussion, a lot of really interesting discussions going on now, and projects going in the ground that leverage private capital. And water users are going to have to pay more as well. Water supply reliability in the future is going to be an expensive thing, and water agencies need to help to pay for that water reliability and are going to need to support managing the natural infrastructure that helps bring their water supply to them. Perhaps the most challenging, even as challenging as dollars are, perhaps the most challenging part of it is going to be the unprecedented cooperation that it needs. GSAs who are, admittedly just getting their feet on the ground. They're going to have to step up in really unique ways, harness the amazing technology and expertise that we developed to do things that we really haven't done before. Surface water users are going to need to be more flexible. They're going to be needing to willing to step out, give a little here so that they can get a little there. The environmental interests, are going to need to be in a proactive problem-solving mode and bringing resources and expertise to the problems and to the solutions. Reservoir operators. How many times have you bumped into the question of, well, that's not the way we not operate our reservoir? We're going to have to think differently. We're going to have to open up to the opportunities of potentially having other water stored in your reservoir that you might not have stored before. State and federal agencies obviously have a role, and they're stepping up, and we need to see them step up even more. Sharing our innovation, looking at how we can help one another, give a little in one place so that we can get something in another place is going to be critical. And I thought the cooperation might be the toughest part, but perhaps the toughest part is trust. Building that trust and maintaining it when things get controversial and heated, and we're trying to think in different ways. So I've talked about water supply resilience and the things that we can do in proactive groundwater management. Certainly my head for much of my career has been mostly in California and the West, but we have to figure this out. For those of you who watch the news or who read about what's happening elsewhere in the world, the groundwater crisis is just scary. This is just one of the many studies that's come out in recent years describing the global groundwater crisis. We have to figure this out in California and in other Western states. And we have to figure out how to work with people in other parts of the world to address the tremendous challenges that we have today, not to mention the challenges that are coming down with more severe droughts and increasing populations around the world. That's all I have for today, but look forward to a discussion both for the next several minutes and going forward. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Maurice. Jenny, I don't see any questions on the chat. Maybe participants would like to share their comments or questions in person. I see we have Rosemary who has her hand raised.
Yeah, so I can just unmute and ask my question, or
yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, Maurice, great, fantastic talk. So early on, you talked about sigma, and it came up very low on your resiliency meter. So, and I agree with you that because of the way sigma is framed, is you can't make things worse. And there's language in there about there cannot be significant and unreasonable lowering of water levels. There cannot be significant and unreasonable degradation of water quality. Same thing on impact of surface water. But is there an opportunity in the implementation of sigma by tightening up some of the language around metrics that will be used for assessment? Do you see any way of working within the sigma regulatory framework to actually achieve some of the goals that you've articulated?
Absolutely. I think that statement might have been signaling disapproval of sigma. Oh
no, I didn't take it as that, but you were indicating we couldn't get very far in terms of resiliency. It was still very low down on the meter, but I'm hopeful that if we actually start to look at getting more specific in terms of metrics for success, we could deal with some of these issues.
I absolutely agree. I think sigma provides the baseline on which we can build these more proactive concepts. I mean, the GSAs have authorities to do things like this. I know, and I want to give complete recognition to the fact that the GSAs are scrambling to meet the basic requirements of the law and get themselves organized. It's a big jump. But once that's in place, as you're suggesting, Rosemary, we have the institutions and the accounting systems to begin building these more proactive measures. the Sigma is a great first step. And my encouragement is that, as you're suggesting, now we have the possibilities, we have some of these things in place to lay the foundation for becoming more proactive. And if we can do that and start thinking that way sooner, we're going to be more quickly on the path to sustainability and more quickly on the path to more resilient water supplies. So absolutely, your point is right on.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Philip, go ahead.
Hi, Maurice.
Good day.
Good to see you again.
Great to see you.
It's been a while. I wanted to ask you about, or get your thoughts on the linkage with energy here. You know, we talk a lot about with groundwater, and you know, I've talked about this idea of using, like you did today, of using the reservoirs as essentially a storage area so that you can, you know, optimize your groundwater storage. But when you start looking at increasing groundwater use and more groundwater movement in and out of groundwater, you probably talk about more energy use, you know, and Sigma offers some has, you know, the expectation is likely ground retirement, and so there's, you know, potential for moving some land into solar production and things like that. And it seems to me that, you know, in the resource world, we talk a lot about water management, we talk about energy management, we talk about land management, but we don't usually talk about them that well together. And with the way things are going, it seems like we really need to start linking our energy and water management better, and not just about like efficiencies, increasing efficiencies of certain equipment and things like that, but broader system management and system optimization. And I'd like your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think I'm probably guilty to some degree of thinking too much of water in a box, not independent of our energy system. But in some of the concepts I'm testing there, I think it's important to put another energy lens on it. For instance, in hydropower generation, what is the cost or the benefit of changing the generation schedules, and can you match that up with some of the in lieu and the groundwater banking concepts that I'm talking about? Also, are there ways to use groundwater basins more wisely so that we're pumping water in different times when it's more cost effective from an energy standpoint? And are there ways to maximize the use of alternative energy sources, solar and wind, in groundwater pumping? And I think bringing in that other piece, the land use piece, is another important part, especially in the view, as you're suggesting, of some lands needing to come out of production as a water savings measure. How do we proactively plan that for multiple benefits, including matching up in the energy needs? So much room to be thinking about that, and really important issue for us to be thinking about. And I think you probably have more ideas on that than I do at this point. So encourage you to keep those coming.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Jenny, do you want to read some of the questions?
Yeah, we've got
in the
a
chat?
couple questions in chat, and I'll put myself in the queue because I have a question too if we have time. So Maurice, we have a question from Camiar. Do you see or know of water accounting systems to do what you think needed?
Yes, there are good water accounting systems. In fact, the water accounting can be done pretty well. The biggest challenge is having, as us groundwater people know, having enough holes in the ground to understand the groundwater hydrogeology and geology well to match up with that. But as an example, we are working in Kern County with the Rosedale Rio Bravo Water Storage District to develop an accounting platform that builds on the modeling work that they've already done, but has a transparent interface that allows all the different water users in the community to be able to see their own accounts, and the district manager to be able to see the intricacies and the different accounts, and sets the stage for, although it's not part of the system yet, but it sets the stage for a water transactions based on that accounting framework. But other vendors have good and developing water accounting systems, ways to show groundwater modeling results in transparent ways so people can look at the trade-offs in different analysis scenarios, et cetera. So a lot of great work on that. I often think when people talk about not understanding groundwater and we don't understand groundwater, I always like to point out that there are places where we can pinpoint within minutes when a certain concentration of a plume is going to get to a well, because we have invested in the monitoring infrastructure. And I'm thinking, of course, at some of the Superfund sites. But a key to feeding these accounting systems is investing on the monitoring system to give you the data to make the accounting system really, really worthwhile.
Great, thank you. We've got a question from Emmanuel with Department of Water Resources about water trading programs, and what do you think is the role of the state in these water trading programs?
Well, I think in the case of water trading in groundwater, big step for the state is going to be one, understanding the system and giving the confidence to the users that their system is going to be accepted, and that's going to mean the Department of Water Resources understanding it, getting familiar with it, pointing out challenges or issues that they see, so that when we get to the point of launching these trading systems, there's a confidence in them and a confidence on the part of the user that it's going to be accepted and valid, and department and confidence in the part of the Department of Water Resources that it's going to be something when we get to the point of pulling the trigger that they can accept, and so that information exchange and that endorsement, so to speak, in as we're developing these systems is going to be key. I also think there's obviously in groundwater, there's challenges in clarity of allocations. We just were participants in publication of a paper last week in UCLA Law Journal about allocations and how allocations in groundwater basins can be done consistent with California water law. And so having the community, including the state agencies that have responsibilities in that area, gather around on that and build confidence in the allocations so that groundwater sustainability agencies can feel good about moving forward with defining those specific allocations is key.
Great, thank you.
Jenny, we have Daniel has his hand raised. Can we let him ask a question and then come back to the chat?
Yeah, I think he's got a question in chat too.
Okay, go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, hi, Maurice. Really great talk. I'm thinking about public funding and the challenges of demonstrating public benefits for recharge. It seems like we've had challenges because of so many of our systems in California have losing reaches of rivers and disconnected groundwater, so that recharge, it's hard to demonstrate the public benefit for environmental gain for rivers or for groundwater dependent ecosystems. Wondering, what your thoughts are in terms of opportunities to demonstrate public benefit for public dollars, or was your suggestion about environmental accounts sort of an alternative strategy to the challenges to demonstrating public benefit, environmental benefit?
Well, that's a complex question. We have all too frequently done a good job of monitoring and accounting for the things that have high dollar value that you can cash in, so to speak. for a high dollar value or account for the economic value. We haven't done that good a job at defining the dollar value of the environmental benefits, for instance, and the benefits of clean air similarly. So I think one important thing is for us to take a leap and invest in some of these projects, and then follow through with the appropriate documentation of the value of them, so that we can begin to answer these questions and account for them in our economic accounting. Happy to have a follow-up to that, Daniel. I don't feel like I've quite addressed your question well.
Jenny, are you still there? Not sure if we lost you or not. All right. Maybe
Are
while
you
we're
still
waiting-
hearing me? I did get a signal that my connection was unstable. So
Yeah, I had the same issue that our internet is not solid right now. So let's see what we can do. I'm going to look at some of the questions, maybe waiting for I think Jenny, we lost her for a minute. Maybe she'll get back on. Let's see. We have a question, and I apologize. I'm just kind of looking through the chat now, so I may be missing some of the earlier question. But a question for from Emmanuel. Great presentation. Thank you. You